How have you built conviction over the years when you were taking all these tough decisions?
2 or 3 years in, I felt like we were going to crash and burn. Early on, when you don't get applications, it's easy to say, I'm going to get off this path and go back to the easy path. But eventually, you come out through the dark tunnel.
How do you think about the cost of switching though? Because after doing private equity for 13 years, when you're switching to building a foundation,
Discovery lies in seeing what everybody else has seen, but thinking what no one else has thought. If we can build, 10, 20 institutions in the next 15 years, I'll be very proud because I think I would have made some meaningful contribution to the country.
what do you think are the biggest problems around the world that nobody's really focusing on or solving? Mr. Dhawan, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's get right to it. What is conviction?
Conviction for me is, you think long term, you look at the end goal, and then you stick to your guns for at least a decade or two.
How have you built conviction over the years when you were taking all these tough decisions of leaving money on the table, leaving Capital, having the goal to say that you want to build an educational institution in India, something that not many people usually say? How did you build conviction over the years?
I was 30 years old as an entrepreneur. I had the conviction that India was going to do well economically. This was in the late 90s. And I had the conviction that you could build a private equity fund out of India, right? And it didn't happen that way the first few years. There was, at some point, maybe 2 or 3 years in, I felt like we were going to crash and burn. But because I knew that the country was fundamentally going to do well, and then as long as we were sensible, had the right strategy, and we would persevere, we would come through it. So I think thinking long term, hanging in there, having perseverance, believing in yourself, and sticking to the fundamentals are core. And then we came out of it and actually did quite well. But it took a decade or more. I was in that business for 13 years and then chose to leave. And then in my second avatar, we again said we want to build a university. It can't happen in a year or two. You have to have a 10, 15, 20-year perspective. Yeah. And then you start building sort of one brick at a time, recruiting people and starting with something distinctive. And then you stick to that distinctiveness. Early on, when you don't get applications, it's easy to say, I'm going to get off this path and go back to the easy path. But once you stick to your guns, because you've done your homework, you know that there's a real opportunity, eventually you come out through the dark tunnel and see the light of day.
Do you think that over the years, this attitude, this depth of having conviction on certain big projects, which may or may not pay off, has developed over the years through some experiences, some stories, some instances that you've been through?
Yeah, I think it's, life experiences sort of teach you that. My mother always told me that you work hard, you do well academically, lots of doors will open up. And it happened for me that way. I got into an Ivy League college in America, largely on the dint of hard work, basically. And that then got me into a fairly prestigious job on Wall Street. It then got me into private equity, got me into top business school. So just having that conviction that, look, a lot of it is outside your control. Yeah. What I can control is I'll work smart and I'll put in like 2x or 1.5x more effort than anybody else. I'm willing to burn the midnight oil. I won't complain if I have to work till 2 a.m. in the morning every day, which I had to do for the first year in my career. So I just learned that if you can suck it up, right, and not complain and just put your head down and work much harder. I'm not smarter than anybody else, but I'm willing to work much harder. And I'm willing to listen to myself, reflect, and iterate, not get wedded to an approach or an idea, but willing to iterate, to learn, be a little humble. I think that served me well through the early phase of my career. So that gave me conviction that, if there's a formula that you have, you just stick to it, basically, as opposed to deviating. But within that formula, you iterate as well. Don't be too dogmatic.
How do you think about the cost of switching, though? Because after doing private equity for 13 years, when you're switching to building a foundation of foundations, first of all, how did that come out to be, the Convergence Foundation? And how do you think about the cost of having invested so much of your time and then reaping the benefits of compound interest? How do you think about that switch?
No, look, there are real costs to it. I think Warren Buffett says it very well, that stick to your knitting.
Yeah.
If you do something well, you've learned something, you spend more than 10,000 hours, just stick with it.
Yeah.
And then farm out your money to other people who can do what they're good at.
Yeah.
I decided for me, life would be more interesting to actually have a second career.
Yeah.
I decided that, given where India is, actually I could have much greater impact on the social sector or with philanthropy than continuing down the path of doing private equity. So that was a conviction, right? Now that transition was very difficult because I was going into the unknown. I was reasonably good at investing. By then we had been managing 5 funds. I made my mistakes early in my career investing in India. Now, we were on a trajectory.
Yeah.
And in all likelihood, we were going to be around the next 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. So the easy thing would have been to stay on that path. It was, not only did I transition, but I, in a sense, burnt my bridges. Not burnt my bridges in terms of relationships. But I said, some people keep one foot on either side of the river.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm going to cross the river and really burn the bridge down, right? That when I'll transition, it's not that I'll stay as chairman of some old firm or sit on corporate boards or do this part-time and do this part-time. I said, I'm going to go into a new career completely. I don't know if I'll be successful. Honestly, it could have failed.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give my all into it and almost restart. So the challenge is you have to restart. You have to unlearn. If I had just taken a corporate mindset into the foundation, I may not have succeeded. It was just belief, naive belief in a sense. And then again, my biggest fear is fear of failure.
Yeah.
So the way I address it is really by working really hard, surrounding myself with smart people, and just saying that, maybe we won't get anything done the first 3-4 years, but eventually something good will happen. Yeah. And that's the way it's panned out for me.
I think that by virtue of being a good capital and time allocator, you've learned that it's not the quantity of information, but the quality of information that really matters. And that insight does not lie in the complexity of diligence.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how you find insights?
So different people have different ways of doing things. For me, one is reading. I've always believed that, again, I learned from someone like Buffett because I was an investor who reads 500 pages a day and he just turned 93. I can't read 500 pages a day. But there was a point in my career I used to read 5-6 hours a day. I probably now read for 3 hours a day. So one is insights from reading. And 2 is observing people. Just being more attentive. When you're watching whether someone is successful, how they're successful, the mistakes people make, how somebody runs a meeting, how someone gives a feedback to somebody else. Being a careful observer teaches you a lot in life. The 3rd is just being reflective. You can bumble along life, but if you say stop every month and look back and see what you could do differently, collect your thoughts. We live in an age with an overload of information. Yeah. So being able to parse out and say, I'm not on social media. Somebody manages some LinkedIn or whatever, but really I spend 0 time on it.
Yeah.
And so partly I do that so that I can focus my attention on reading. I can focus my attention on thinking. I can focus my attention on meeting people and observing people and learning from other people. So for me, that's where insights have come from. But it's also a little bit of mindset. I've always believed that discovery lies in seeing what everybody else has seen, but thinking what no one else has thought. So also being a little bit of a contrarian, being a little bit of a out of the box thinker, as opposed to just जो सब सोच रहे हैं वही सोचना.
Yes,
that's the easy, lazy thing to do. So I think you have to push yourself a little bit to eke out insights from all of these layers of information.
Reading is hard, especially after a long day of intellectually draining work. How do you manage that?
It's not easy. It's very hard to do interspersed.
Yeah.
You need chunks of time, you need quiet time. You can't do it when you have a phone call every 10 minutes or you're getting distracted with WhatsApp or email. So I also believe that there have to be periods of time in your day when you shut yourself out from phone, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is my social media in a sense. And just concentrate.
Yeah.
And sometimes 2 hours of concentration is the equivalent of 5 hours of, intermittent,
Got it.
sort of distracted reading, as it were.
Let's talk about building institutions, which is a lot like building cathedrals because you may never get to see them. How do you think about building institutions and what does it take to build an institution?
So in my new avatar now at the Convergence Foundation, firstly, we think about what type of institution, because there's no point doing what everybody else has already done, right? So because I want to do new things, not just further what already exists. So the insight I came up with is that India has what I call the missing middle. There's a missing middle, right? And we will focus on that missing middle. What is the missing middle? That in a lot of areas of development, there are hundreds of thousands of NGOs who do wonderful work on the ground. They have great heart. They have great connect with the community. They innovate. They sometimes come with good solutions because they listen to the beneficiary. They don't necessarily know how to work with government. They don't necessarily know how to work at scale. They don't know how to create blueprints. They don't know how to advocate and unlock budgets, right? Because they're working at a lower level. At the same time, there are these think tank people, policy, who think at a very high level. They're in the world of ideas. And they write reports, but it stops with a report and some echo chamber convening. So that missing middle is somebody who can translate ideas in a very practical manner, figure out what to prioritize, but also learn from the ground new ideas, innovation, and embed that into the system. I believe at the end of the day, you have to work with government, state government in particular, in the area of development. They spend the most money. They are the principal actor. And so the orchestrators in the missing middle, the sutradhars, are people who can learn from here and here and find ways of working with government to take things to scale. So that's really the area in which we want to build institutions. And the best way to build an institution is to find the right leader and help them build a second line, get some proof of concept early on within the first 3 years or so, make the funding sustainable. That allows you to live for a much longer period of time. So I think those are the ways in which you can ultimately build something that is an institution. And to build a real institution, I think one needs also some degree of thought leadership. You don't think of something as an institution. You may think of it as a programmatic org if it does good work. If there are only legs and limbs, but no head, it's not an institution. So you need a combination of legs and limbs, but also a head. So like a do tank almost, as opposed to just a think tank or just a running org.
Yeah. What do you think is different from building an institution to building a company to building a foundation?
I think the social sector is harder. These problems are more complex. You have less under your control. Government is the main actor in terms of what it's doing. And the measures are not ones you can measure every quarter. So I think in this sector, you need to have a lot of process indicators. You need to have a lot of patience. And you need to really work on different parts of the problem, like a holistic versus a point solution. So firstly, I think it's understanding that there's a different approach altogether. And I think an institution is one that's built to last. So it's an institution that thinks long term, that builds a model that is sustainable. It may be small. It doesn't have to be very big. It scales at some reasonable pace, doesn't try to get too far ahead of itself. And it has one North Star metric. If you try to do too many things, you go nowhere. You have one North Star metric that you point towards, where you want to get to in like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So you think very long term, one North Star metric that pulls you forward. And it needs mission-driven people. People who are real believers, a small group of people who can change the world. So that's what it takes, I think, to build a great institution.
How and why did you build this?
So some things are very personal. Like if you look at air pollution, we live in Delhi NCR. It's gotten better, but our quality of air is amongst the worst in the world. And it's a major public health crisis. It's very visible. So I said, this is something that really needs to be worked on. In fact, we did a survey initially in the slums of Delhi, and we found that people there also really care about this issue. They're aware of it. Of course, they have many other priorities in life, some basic needs, but they know हमारे बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जा सकते हैं, or मैं काम के लिए नहीं जा सकी because of this. I was not feeling well. So we said this is a problem we have to work on. And then when we started working on it, there are multiple sources. Obviously, government is doing its part. But we said one very tangible thing is local sources of pollution. So we worked with the Delhi government, the municipality. And to the credit of the Delhi government, they've rolled out a program where there are lots of projects, right? कि यहाँ पे मलबा है, यहाँ पे garbage burning हो रहा है, यहाँ पे construction dust है, यहाँ पे road को pave होना है, because that's why it's leading to pollution. Local sources. 150,000 projects were created in the last year, and to the credit of the government, they have resolved almost 90% of those projects. And it's all work done by government functionaries, municipal workers. What was our role? To create the program in partnership with government. We built the software, the project management software. We did a training program along with IIT Delhi to make it happen. We really worked with them to figure out what's the standard operating procedure, and then a measurement dashboard so that the management, the municipal commissioner could watch this. But it's incredible to see when you work in such a fashion how tangible the results are. When you go back to the place and you see that things have been fixed, because everything gets tagged with a photo. Yeah. And then the resolution also, there's a photo and it's tagged and you know that it's done. So there's a lot of satisfaction. And then we roll this out to 10 cities. Now we're talking to the Smart Cities mission and to others to see if it can be institutionalized into the government's program as well. So this is just one example of how, there's a felt need, you feel about it personally, and then you study it, and then start working on it, scale it, and then you say, ultimately, I can't go to 100 cities. हमने 10 शहर में दिखा दिया है, यूपी में 5 शहर में चले गए, अब we can't go to every city. अब ultimately, Sarkar has to own this. We're already working in partnership with them, but they have to own it, they have to create the budgets. So इसको institutionalize कैसे करें? So that's the next step that we're now working on. So like that, we worked across many other areas, including women's, female labor force participation. Huge opportunity in India. Because again, if you look today, girls are, or women are as educated, actually better educated than boys. The girls' gross enrollment ratio in college is higher than that of boys. So more girls are going to college than boys. Yet the female labor force participation is so low. So there are many things that can be done. So we started doing a diagnostic with the UP government on this. We started working with the formal sector. We have a strategy for the informal sector. We partnered with an org called ACT, non-profit, to work with the startup ecosystem. So multiple things, even in the first year and a half, because you want to pilot, test out, see what works. So that has been the approach.
You're also on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Could you talk a bit about that experience and what it has been like to be there and contribute?
So they are the largest foundation in the world. They are stepping up their giving to about $9 billion a year, which is publicly announced. I think they are very committed to India. Bill Gates and Melinda both come to India every year. They have engaged with not just the central government, but also with several state governments. Of course, their primary focus is on health, but they've also worked on sanitation, agriculture, financial inclusion. I think of late, Bill, in fact, spoke about it recently, an announcement with the Reliance Foundation around women's labor force participation and economic empowerment. So that's another area, gender equity, that they're looking at. And I think big believers in this whole idea that India, there are innovations out of India that can actually travel to the rest of the developing or emerging world. Not just how we, for instance, what we did with Swachh Bharat, our Prime Minister, what we are doing with the Jal Jeevan Mission, what we have done, for instance, with financial inclusion, Jan Dhan, UPI, etc. The whole India stack, digital public infrastructure, now taking that to 50 countries across the world. So I think they're big believers in not only can work be done in India, and obviously any improvement you drive in India, improvement in SDGs will turn the needle as far as the world is concerned, because we are such a large populous nation. But also this is a learning lab for the rest of the world, because India is innovative, it comes up with solutions, and then they can help take it to Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, etc. So I feel very excited that we are in India, and we're in one of the most forward-looking, exciting, high-growth places in the world, and almost a place that can be a champion for the global south.
At a personal level, how has it been like?
So it's a chance to see how somebody who's very organized, works at very big scale, can actually drive change and work in partnership with government, because that has been their modus operandi, work with leading multilateral institutions, which they have done, and work with a variety of stakeholders, a stakeholder of non-profits, locally, leaders in advocacy, because last mile delivery, you have to work with partners. So a partnering approach as well. And a very, very strong focus on scientific development, new vaccines, new medicines to work on public health. So I'm not as competent in that arena, but I think they do a particularly good job upstream in terms of research and development as well.
What makes philanthropists succeed and fail? And how is that different from enterprises succeeding or failing?
So I think firstly, you have to realize that with philanthropy, you're giving your money away, right? You're not going to get a return. So I'm not looking at return on equity or something like that. So when you're doing that, the first thing is one must be audacious. If you're giving it away, then may as well take high risk as opposed to low risk, right? May as well try to hit the chakka as opposed to singles and doubles. Right? So that's number one. Two is, philanthropy at the end of the day is a drop in the ocean. It is small compared to how much business spends, how much government spends, right? And lots of problems are solved by the market. So philanthropy's role is to look to see where market failure exists, but also to realize that government is often the biggest actor. Philanthropy, what it can do is innovate at small scale, build evidence that some new innovation is working, find a way to advocate for it or take it to government to say, look, this is working, and then help government in that scaling process. So if government wants to roll it out, say through aspirational districts or aspirational blocks, saying, I'll come and partner with you and work with you to make it happen. So I think that is the best role of philanthropy, where you can partner. You work with good non-profits, build their capability, you work with government, you look at innovations within the market as well, and see how you can learn from that. And recognize that you're a small actor. At the end of the day, you're more of a catalyst than anything else. And the third is humility. At the end of the day, we are lucky because India has grown, right, that we've had the chance to actually create wealth. And so I think, as Gandhiji said, we're trustees of that wealth. It's a concept of trusteeship. We have to give back to society, but we have to do it in a humble manner, not from a position of privilege or looking down, So I think those, for me, have been some of the lessons learned with regards to philanthropy. And be brutally honest. Look, a lot of things don't work. We are always overconfident. We like to brag, कि हमने ये किया, वो किया. But these are very hard issues. When government has been working on trying to solve a problem already, like with education, complex problem, it takes a long time. Ki who are we as a philanthropist to come in 2 years fix it? It's not going to happen like that. So being humble, recognizing that, accepting your mistakes, accepting the complexity, I think that is also very important. And having that long-term orientation, knowing that there are no quick fixes. Things take a long time, and you have to listen to other people as you develop your approach.
Why build? Why choose the enterprise of building something? Especially when you can be on the sidelines and just watch what other people are building.
So I think that is an approach as well. I think for many people who are in their current business, right, and I see it happening in India now, we actually started a platform called Accelerate India Philanthropy to work with high net worth, wealthy people who want to give. We've met 135 people in the last year. And I must say 50+% have indicated that they want to give personal money, not CSR to sabko karna hai, but actually want to give. They've already started in a small way, but they want to do much more. Now, they are not going to leave their business. They're going to full-time be doing their business. So I think for a lot of people, this approach of, my primary thing is to focus on my business. I've allocated 10% of my net worth to philanthropy. I'll get some family members involved. I'll find some good non-profits. I'll give money to them, let them do the work. I'm outsourcing in a sense, and let other people do the work on my behalf. I'll monitor them. Another approach could be I'll stick to my business, I'll pick one area, healthcare. I'll develop some know-how. I'll spend 5-10% of my time. I'll get a good leader to lead the initiative, my foundation, and still work with the existing ecosystem.
Yeah.
I decided to do this full time.
Yeah.
Right? So I have more time in my hands. And as I said at the outset, this missing middle, the Sutradhar role, as it were. I feel that we need to build new institutions. Not enough existing institutions are there. Very, very few. So that's why we want to build from scratch. Because, these system orchestrators who can play in that middle, if we can build, 10, 20 institutions in the next 15 years, I'll be very proud because I think I would have made some meaningful contribution to the country.
Yeah. What do you think are the biggest problems around the world that nobody is really focusing on or solving?
Our country has recognized, but not every part of the country has recognized, is that economic growth is the key. Even if you want development of society, you can't, or even if you want to be a superpower, you can't do it without economics.
Yeah.
Right? So improving our per capita income should be our number one goal. Now, I see that in many states, I'm very happy that when you look at Uttar Pradesh today, which was a Bimaru state earlier, today you see the energy. They have an aspiration for $1 trillion GDP. They want to attract investment. They want to build infrastructure. They want to create jobs, right? Whereas there are many other states in India, I see, where they are still focused just on handouts. They're not reaching out to attract business. They still have this deep socialist kind of mindset where they're not pro-business. So I think problem number one, if you ask me, is we all have to focus on this per capita income. Government has to switch. Our Prime Minister has said, from red tape to red carpet. Right? Now, while this Prime Minister may be saying this, are all our chief ministers saying this? Are all our bureaucrats doing this? Do all of us believe this? So I think that is one major mind shift change that we need. A second one is we do have some hard problems, as I was saying earlier. Like, if you look at women's role in India, I think there are some states that are proactively, I saw something from Madhya Pradesh today where they're talking about what they have done for women, but much more needs to be done. I mean, the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, women are so talented, and yet the participation in the labor force is so low, this is an intractable problem. It's not just social norms. I think it's also about safety, security, mobility, transport that's safe for women. It is about flexibility that women want in the workplace. It's also about corporates and being more responsible and ensuring more women are working. It's about also informal enterprise, that we make financing available for women-led enterprise or enterprise that are likely to employ women. It's also about having a strategy in India that we want to create more jobs where women are likely to work. Like, say, a lot of the jobs now coming in electronics, garments, this China plus one. We need to double down, triple down. More PLI, more employment-linked incentive. But these will be very women-friendly jobs. So I think a strategy around how we get women's energy unlocked. Mao used to say, women hold up half the sky, right? So they should be equal contributors because they are as capable as we are. So I think that hopefully will happen in this coming generation. So I think these are two big things. There are many other issues I can point to, but these are two big pieces of potential. If we can just change from red tape to red carpet, and two is we can say, believe that women hold up half the sky, and they will be equal contributors. We'll do everything to make that happen. I think this will unlock the potential of India during Amrit Kal, which I'm a big believer. Next 25 years are going to be our best years.
Going back to conviction building for a moment, I think in a world that advertises glorious notions of success, you created and carved really your own path at a time that may have suited you or may not have suited you. What I'm curious about is how did you do that and how did you carve your own notion of success, in addition to, of course, having that attitude to do so?
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from your own philosophy that you develop about life, about what constitutes happiness, success, etc. So I, always believe that money beyond a certain point doesn't hold much value for me because all my financial needs were met. And at some point, I always have this formula, H equals R minus E. Happiness equals reality minus expectation. So if you keep raising your expectation or you keep spending more, there's no limit to how much. You can have 10 private jets and do this and do that. So ultimately, if you manage your own expectations, manage your own mindset, you'll be happier. And take life as it comes. You do your best. You pick the area that you're working in, which is going to be important. You put in your best effort. You have big goals, be ambitious, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to be satisfied with it. Look, you put in the best effort. Yeah. And sometimes it'll work out. Sometimes it won't. This concept of nishkam karma. Ki I'll work without the expectation of reward. And reward, I don't mean only financial. Reward meaning the success metric, as it were. So I think being a little bit humble about that we're all human at the end of the day, we're not superhuman. We all make mistakes. And take life as it goes. Don't let it bother you too much. Yeah. My Nana ji always used to say, "Ek kan se andar lo, dusre se bahar nikalo." Matlab, don't let the tension build up here. So I think that attitude I've tried to, none of us are perfect, but try to inculcate. So therefore, for me, success is not necessarily meant, can I show up on some list of being wealthy, or do I necessarily have to have a big persona? That doesn't matter to me. I mean, if I can in some small way have impact, there are many other people who are much bigger, do much more than I do, but in small way I can feel I genuinely made a difference to our country, to our people, to the world. I will be able to go away peacefully.
What are some of the important truths in the market and about how the world works that we don't quite see?
When you say market, you mean the financial market or?
Well, it could be any market. It's not necessarily financial.
Firstly, in the market of personal decisions, right? I think that at the end of the day in life, there are 10 important decisions. And figuring out which are those 10 important decisions is not something most of us are conscious about. I believe one of the most important decisions, for instance, is who your life partner is. If you choose to get married, who is that life partner of yours? Very important decision. So you have to think hard about it. You have to experience it. And of course, you can get it wrong, but it's super. Or how you bring up your children, right? It's super important. But there are 10. It's not 100. Yeah. And I think figuring out those 10 and putting a lot of energy behind those 10 is very important. So that's on the personal, including one of them would be working on yourself to lower your ego, to remind yourself that, because when you're successful, your head swells up. To remind yourself that, bhai, there's a lot of luck involved. Yeah. Ki be humble. Jo phal se bhara hua ped hai, wo jhukta hai. You know, that is a core philosophy of life. So I think on the personal side, for me, it's that stay focused on the 8-10 most important things. I think as far as business and financial markets and all, I always believe that being somewhat of a contrarian is very important. I think being able to think a little bit differently, and for that you have to shut yourself out a little bit from the world of gossip, the world of just khabar. I don't check internet sites for news. If you're going to wallow in other people's thoughts all the time, you can never be a contrarian. I don't think you should be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian. Yeah. But I think in markets that's very important, for instance, right? To even a business, if you're getting into a business, getting into it when it's very hot, faddish, that's when everybody wants to do it. Or same thing with equities. Jab IPO market mein garmi hai, to sab usme aana chahte hain. To have the courage to not do it. To have a lot of control over your own emotions. Because I think in business that's very important. Right? To control your own emotions, not react instinctively. To instinctively know that you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. That's a very, very important part. To have a culture that's very open, where you can just, mill around. There's no hierarchy. I hate it when people call me sir and all this stuff. That, we are all equals at the end of the day. It's a first among equals. Obviously, you need some hierarchy for decision making. Right? So I learned, at least in that world of business and all, those few things at least worked for me. And that was created a little bit of a distinctive culture. What I'm most proud of is when we set up Capita, for instance, about 25 years ago. If you look at many of the people there, they've been there 20 plus years. They were there in the beginning, and they're still there. And they'll probably be there another 10, 15, 20 years. So I think there was something special in terms of the culture, the way we did things, that got people to stay there for a very, very long period of time. And that's what creates an institution in a sense, because of that longevity.
The market of personal decisions, as you called it, Collab Fund by Morgan Housel has this very interesting article, and it says very important and hard to teach. And really the first thing in the first paragraph mentioned in that article is the most important decisions in your life are whether you marry, whom you marry, and whether you have kids. How would you think about these personal, the top 10 most impactful decisions? How would you make them?
Yeah. So look, I learned a lot, as I said, from observation. Your own parents, you learn a lot from. They are wiser than you, but they also have faults. So to be able to see all the good things they have, but also their own fault. You see family around you, right? In terms of what they did right, wrong. People who are ahead of you, who made these decisions. You talk to other people, you discover yourself. Like with marriage, I thought very hard about who is the kind of person I'm going to be happy with. And, eventually it dawned on me, if I marry someone who's a better human being than me, fundamentally I'll be a happy person. And that's who I found. And, I've always been happy thereafter because, So it's just these little insights that you have, that you discover through looking around. A certain type of person who is maybe too aggressive or wants to fight over every little thing, or gets frustrated or is too money-minded, it would have been a recipe for disaster at some point down the road. Maybe initially theek chalta, but some point. But I had that insight from when I was younger, and I think a lot of people don't think about it. They look at the superficial things, but don't look at these deeper things. And to that, you have to know yourself first. And then also look to see what mistakes other people have made. So I think that graveyard of mistakes, one must go there and dig and actually look carefully, is my big belief. And the same is true of other things as far as life decisions are concerned.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, that this knowledge can be translated into so many other domains. That if you know yourself and if you visit your graveyard of mistakes, that would be a very nice thing to do before you make.
And not just your own, but other people's, who you see in front of you. I always believe that you have lots of people to observe around you. You see some family member where something hasn't worked out. You see a friend who's, things haven't worked out. And that gives you some insights also. So it's a data point of one is not necessarily good, which is yourself sometimes. Looking around. And I also believe in mini role models. Of course, you have big role models who inspire you. But mini role models means always looking at somebody who does something much better than you. You learn from them. But also, what are the things they don't do so well? So that's what I mean about being an astute observer. You can see the world, and you can also see the world. You know what I mean? So, and you can learn a lot from that.
You've worked in education for so long as well. There is this one view of education that you can look at it as ROI. There is another view in which you can look at it as human capital development. And there is yet another view in which you can look at it as how can you find a job? What's the ethos of any good education that all of us should probably understand before we make deep, impactful, big educational decisions of, say, whether to study in India or abroad, where to study, what to study, and how to study?
Yeah, I think for many of us, education shapes us into who we are, right? So I think that's very important. It's very important for building a good society. So that's one aspect of it. A good human being, a good contributor to society, right? A good education should teach you that. A second aspect is about personal life. To be able to make good life decisions should come out of a good education, including being able to think for yourself. It should come out of a good education. And a third is the economic perspective, which is to be an economic contributor, to be a productive citizen. I mean, we do need education system to ultimately make us more productive, right? Make us better suited for what the world needs. Now, the problem with today's world is you're getting educated, particularly formally, in a certain period of time, certain life stage. But the world will keep changing as you go ahead. So you can't prepare for 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So what's very important in the 21st century is developing the mindset for a love for learning, continuous learning. Those kinds of things are almost, that meta learning is almost more important than mastering some subject. It's very important to master some subject knowledge, but it's very important to have these attributes, because being a lifelong learner, particularly in knowledge work, is absolutely critical.
But don't you think this idea of ultimately also being productive citizens of the economy is rooted in somewhat the industrialization era, where we needed people who could work in factories, who could work as labor? How do you think about that notion? Do you think that's antiquated? Do you think that's still true?
No, I don't think it's antiquated. Look, most people are in basic jobs, so they need some requisite skill. Having said that, I think skilling beyond a certain point, like we've had a lot of skilling initiatives, private sector, government, I think there are limits to it. Honestly, I think more important is demand. We create more jobs. If you create more jobs, automatically people will get lifted up and get, as long as they have some basic skills. Like if you look at even the IT industry, the fact that India opened up, the telecom revolution happened, bandwidth costs came down, we got the initial set of jobs from the US and elsewhere. At that point in time, we didn't have that many engineering colleges. But because the IT boom happened, 5,000 engineering colleges came up. NIT, AppTech came up for training. Infosys and other companies built their training centers. Mysore, that big training center, TCS, all of them. So the demand creates its own supply, in a sense. So I think we're in an era where we have a certain base talent already. Kids are already going to school. Many of them now are going to secondary school, much higher percentage than before. The fact that we have almost 45 million students in college, it's a huge base. So I think that it's more now we have to create more jobs. And that'll pull people into developing the last mile skills, because the basic skills are there already.
What do you think young people completely misprice, which only the market corrects with failure?
So I think young people sometimes are trying to optimize for current income, because it's a desire everybody has when they come out, that they want the highest paying job. I think you want to be in a learning phase. You should look for the best culture, the best boss, the best place where you will, accelerate your journey over the next 3 years. It may mean lower compensation, but it will set you on a different trajectory afterwards. Very hard to do because most people have current needs. And I don't mean a huge sacrifice. I mean it may be a 20% sacrifice. The second thing is, people misprice the idea of saving and what saving can mean early on in life, and good investment. If you can save early on, I remember when I got married, I took all the money I got. I was very lucky. I put it into one stock, HDFC Bank, and I held it for a long, long period of time. And that decision paid off. It was like gold. I could have spent that money. We could have said, paise mile hain, isko kharch karo, buy another car or buy whatever. The fact that early on we saved it, it became a huge next egg, and we invested it wisely. So I think for young people, that start saving when you're young, start also investing when you're young, wisely, not based on some tip your friend is giving you, is very important, because the power of compounding then kicks in much earlier. And most people misprice that. We undervalue compounding. We don't realize how much 40 years of compounding
Yeah.
can actually give you. We also misprice things like, personal life may what's important. Like I was saying earlier, the few important decisions that matter. We're always caught up in day-to-day activity as the urgent versus the important. So firstly, to do the important, you need to know what's important, right? And then you need to make sure you apply your dimag to the important things. So both of those are very, very important. And often I think people miss out on that.
I want to ask you a set of questions, the answers to which can be very instantaneous by you.
Yeah.
What's the most overpriced thing you've done?
Probably vacation.
What's the most underpriced thing you've ever done?
I do it 4 times a week, which is to go for a head massage, which the value of which is way above what I pay for it. So I think it's grossly underpriced.
Credentials, overpriced or underpriced?
Generally overpriced, but it depends on what you're doing. Like in private equity, credentials matter because people are giving you money. So if you have a thappa of Harvard Business School, IIM, it matters. Even in this startup ecosystem, if you had an IIT ka thappa, it was much easier to get money and all of that. So I think in those areas, like capital tends to like thappas, certain types of jobs, you want to work for McKinsey, credentials matter. So there's a part of the world where credentials still matter because you won't get the entry point, right? But the rest of it, the world, I think credentials matter less.
An Ivy League education, overpriced or underpriced?
No, I think it depends on, it's overpriced, no doubt, because I think there are many other places you can go where you can get a good education. I think today in India also, there are many options that are maybe not as good as yet, but almost as good and definitely much, much cheaper. So I think today I would rethink whether I would go. I went to the US for undergrad. I have one daughter who went to India, one who went abroad. Each child will do whatever they want. So I don't want to force them. But I do feel wo delta kam ho gaya hai. Pehle you couldn't get it now. So I think in that sense it's overpriced because there are many other places that have caught up.
Yeah. Starting your own company.
Overpriced because today it's become this thing that somehow everybody should start their own. I'm all for entrepreneurship and I want people to be entrepreneurs. But I think they should do it for the right reasons. See, I think a lot of people are doing it because they want to make a quick buck. And I think you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to do it for the long term. I always look at someone like Sanjeev Bikhchandani, who suffered a lot through his early years of entrepreneurship. There was no money available. He had to teach MBA classes on the side to make money. He lived out of a barsati. But he persevered. He didn't suddenly say कि मैं अब ये छोड़ के कुछ और करूँगा. I need to raise so much money. So I like that aspect of it. And my worry also in India is too much of it is fancy companies, versus I would like to see entrepreneurship in 100 cities in India. And that ground level ghati entrepreneur versus just the thappe wala entrepreneur. That hasn't happened as much in India. So I think India is very entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs will make a difference. But it's only happening in one narrow niche where money is going and the VCs like. But there's this broad ecosystem. What you look at China, a lot of these entrepreneurs came out of, they were peasants who became entrepreneurs. The guy who owns Geely today, he was a peasant or came out of these tier 3, tier 4 cities. So I hope we can push capital and more of this entrepreneurship genie out of the big cities into these smaller towns.
Status, money, wealth.
I would still, out of the three, wealth. Because wealth gives you the ability to spend your time the way you want to. Because you can earn an interest on it, and therefore you are flexible in terms of what you want to do. You can pick your career, you can do whatever you want to do. You can choose to how you allocate your time, and you can do things with your wealth. By money, I think you may mean salary or current income. I think that's also useful to build wealth, and I think people should have aspirations, there's no doubt. Status is a double-edged sword, you know. I mean, obviously, everybody wants to have a certain status in society, but if you start becoming a social climber,
Yeah.
then that's not something for me, at least.
What's the most underrated skill in business?
I think in business, I think being, how should I say, shrewd. I know it's a pejorative term. It sounds bad. But that very commercial, shrewd sense of being able to sniff out, having good judgment, let's put it this way, is the better way to do it. But judgment in a commercial way. Pragmatism, judgment, those things I think are the most important skills. And it could apply to how you select people. It could apply to the partnerships you do. It could apply to buying a company. It could apply to performance that you drive out of your employees. But that little bit of, being shrewd, that I think is something that's very, very critical. India has it in spades, by the way, that dhanda.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge strength we have as a country. We need to maybe be more professional, more ethical. What I don't like is even in this startup ecosystem, how many unethical people have surfaced up. So we need to teach more ethical business, but the dhanda part we do have.
And finally, what's the best trade you've ever made? Could be an economic, could be a non-economic trade.
I think it is really about coming back to India. I went when I was very young for college. I worked in the US, 2 jobs. Then I went to business school. I worked again. I could have stayed on. I was getting a high salary. I worked in hedge fund, private equity. It was very exciting work. But it would have not been the life I wanted to live. So I took the leap of faith, came back. On many fronts, it helped. I think on the family front, I was happier. On the business front, because lots of opportunities in India, but also purpose front. Like I feel like I'm making some contribution in an important phase of our country where we are developing and we need to become a developed country. So I think that to me was, when I look back, the single biggest thing from my perspective, because I could have been on a completely different trajectory.
Mr. Dhawan, this has been absolutely great. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. I love your questions, and I look forward to watching all your podcasts.
Thank you.